In space, Tony and Nebula are alone on a spaceship. This ship cannot be steered, it can only float forever. The two of them have been here for 22 days. The only way to have fun is to play a projection game that Tony invented himself. He used the damaged helmet to record a message to Pepper. I don't know if we will see each other again in this life or not. There's only about a day left before the oxygen runs out. Tony fell asleep with a heavy heart. He thought that when he woke up, he would see a god or some angel, but the person he saw was Captain Marvel, Carol. She pushes the ship back to the Avenger base. Soon, Steve and the others came to pick him up. After all this time, Tony finally returned home, but he couldn't cheer up. He already lost that child. After a short rest, the remaining Avengers members gathered together to tell Carol the whole story. Steve and everyone are always looking for Thanos, hoping to change history. But until now, there was still no clue, until Nebula appeared. She was the only one there who understood Thanos. Previously, Nebula always tried every way to please this adoptive father. That's why she knew about Thanos' retirement plan. He planned to reduce the population by half a long time ago. Every time Nebula asked where they would go after success, Thanos always answered, to that garden. At this time, Rocket also stood up. What it discovered was that Thanos created an unprecedented wave of energy when he put on the Infinity Gauntlet and snapped his fingers. 2 days ago, that wave of energy appeared again. Therefore, that place is probably Thanos' hiding place. So the group immediately set out for the target location. There were no troops or defense systems there, not even anyone else. Thanos is alone. This planet with its majestic mountains is an ideal place to keep fake. Because of snapping his fingers, one of Thanos' arms was almost disabled. Now he is no different from an ordinary farmer. Right after that, Carol appeared first and quickly restrained him. Bruce and Rhodey immediately followed. Next, Thor entered and cut off Thanos' arm wearing the Infinity Gauntlet. But all the Infinity Stones are gone. Thanos snapped his fingers 2 days ago to destroy them all. This means everything is irreversible. Last time, Thor did not behead Thanos, giving him the opportunity to snap his fingers. This time, Thor cut off his head, but no one felt the joy of victory because they had lost too much. Either way, Thanos is dead. Time passed quietly for 5 years. Remember the ending in Ant-Man 2. At that time, Scott and everyone were doing experiments. He was stuck in the quantum field and couldn't get out. That was also the time of the blip event. The people outside turned into dust. Now finally, Scott is back. However, when he returned to his old home, he discovered that his beloved daughter had grown up. 5 years have passed. The world has changed completely. Everyone was doing their own thing. Carol started to wander around again. Natasha worries about all kinds of things big and small every day. She and Steve still didn't give up hope. They always believe there is still a chance for change. Maybe that helps them feel better. They always kept hope, but then sad news made Natasha hurt. Hawkeye's family turned into dust during the blip event 5 years ago. After that event, he became a Ronin and went around assassinating people. For 5 years, everyone thought Hawkeye had turned into a murderer. Only Natasha understood that he was numbing his emotions. She was heartbroken and asked Rhodey to find his whereabouts. While Natasha and Steve shared their sadness together, they suddenly received a text message from Scott. Then the two sides quickly met. Scott recounted what he went through. He was only in the quantum realm for 5 hours, but outside, 5 years had passed. That means that in the quantum realm, time operates differently from the outside world. If they can grasp this rule, they can return to the time before Thanos snapped his fingers, therefore preventing a tragedy from happening. It's like a time machine. This is really crazy, but if Scott can do it, it will prove that this plan is feasible. They need an expert to help. Therefore, Steve and Natasha were forced to meet Tony, who chose the typical life. He eventually married Pepper, and they had a cute daughter named Morgan. At this point, Tony didn't want to get involved in any more trouble. He just wants to live peacefully with his family. So when Steve presented the plan, Tony did not hesitate to refuse. He felt lucky to be back with Pepper, and he didn't want to take any more risks. Furthermore, Scott's return was purely a matter of luck. The possibility was only 1 in a billion. Not to mention building a time machine. Even if it could be done, it is unlikely that it would be able to stop Thanos or be able to return safely. Losing so many teammates hurt Tony, but he couldn't risk it again. Steve and everyone else couldn't force him, so they went to Bruce. Over the past 5 years, Bruce had reconciled with Hulk. Now the two of them were completely united. Upon hearing about Steve and everyone's plan, Bruce decided to participate. That night, after washing the dishes, Tony looked at the photo of him and Peter and fell into thought. Over the past 5 years, he still cannot escape the pain of loss. Even though he refused Steve's invitation to cooperate, Tony still decided to give it a try. Scott's words inspired him. Tony and Friday tried a room purchase. He didn't have too many expectations, but he didn't expect it to be successful. This proves that Scott's plan is completely feasible. Before that, he rejected Steve because this plan was too crazy. But now Tony finds out it's actually possible. He cannot continue to live peacefully anymore. Otherwise, he will forever be haunted by the essence of Spider-Man. Tony looks to Pepper to think about what to say. How many years has Pepper been with Tony? I understand that you always feel responsible. If he doesn't let him do this, Tony will live in pain for the rest of his life. Pepper didn't stop him. At the same time, Bruce and Scott finished researching the time machine. While Steve was stuck, Tony appeared with a new helmet. His appearance also brought hope to Steve. Then they gathered Nebula, Rocket, and Rhodey to discuss a big plan. To defeat Thanos, they alone are not enough. Everyone split up to find their scattered comrades. Bruce and Rocket go to New Asgard to find Thor. At this time, from an elegant man, Thor turned into an obese man who spent all day driving. Besides playing games, he only eats food, and his lifestyle of living on his own and sleeping on alcohol is not pleasant. Although he is always laughing and joking on the outside, Thor has never forgotten the pain Thanos caused. When he knows there's still hope, Thor was moved to tears. But luckily, he did not refuse to participate. Meanwhile, Natasha, thanks to Rhodey's help, finds Hawkeye on duty in Tokyo. She brings hope to him. Finally, the Avengers members have fully assembled. The time machine is still in testing. The battery particles they had were only enough for each person to make one trip and 2 tests. War Machine now wonders if they can time travel, why wasn't it time for Thanos to be an infant? And then, here's a sneak peek at the film. But time doesn't work that way. Rhodey could only shrug his shoulders helplessly. After the last successful test, people started to prepare more carefully. They must split their actions to determine the time and place of the appearance of the 6 Infinity Stones. Must succeed from the first time, otherwise everything will completely break down. The Reality Stone, also known as Aether, once appeared in Jane's body, Thor's ex-girlfriend. Then they took it out in Asgard. Next is the Power Stone. Quill stole it on the planet Morag. The third is the Soul Stone on the planet Vormir. Next is the Time Stone that Ancient One tries to keep. Getting it is not easy. The Mind Stone is Loki's scepter, and the Space Stone is the Tesseract Cube. If they timed it right, they could get 3 stones in New York. After getting ready, everyone split up into action. Thor and Rocket go to get the Reality Stone. Natasha and Hawkeye go to Vormir to get the Soul Stone. Rhodey and Nebula are in charge of the Power Stone. The rest took action in New York. Bruce takes care of retrieving the Time Stone, the Tesseract Cube, and the scepter Loki appeared at the same time. This is the time of the Avengers 1 event. As soon as they landed, they saw Hulk smashing cars and hitting people. Steve stood next to Bruce and asked if he should hit something to feel it. Hulk only symbolically struck twice. Then Bruce saw the Ancient One approaching the sanctum to Wellroom. After hearing Bruce explain the reason, the Ancient One explained he came too early. At this time, Steven was still a doctor. From here, you can see the Ancient One had already predicted everything, but she did not interfere. This proves that the title of Marvel's strongest magician is not a baseless rumor. On the other side, Thor and Rocket have returned to Asgard in 2012. This is when Thor content takes place too. Soon after their arrival, Thor's mother Frigga passed away. Thor stood from afar looking at his mother with emotions welling up in his heart. Today is the day his mother passed away. Thor doesn't want to endure this pain again. He intended to give up. Seeing that, Rocket immediately gave him a slap. It's not good at comforting others. It can only say to Thor that those who are good, but those wiped out by Thanos can still be saved. This is the only thing they can do. But things are not that easy. Thor knew full well that his mother would die today, but he couldn't do anything. Even though he couldn't change the outcome, at least he deserved a chance to escape. Thor left alone. He wants a little quiet. Unexpectedly, he met his mother by chance, Frigga. With just a glance, she could guess part of the story. Everyone hopes Thor becomes a hero to save the world once again, but only his mother cares whether he is happy and whether he eats well. Under his mother's encouragement, Thor regained his spirit. Not long after, Rocket obtained the Reality Stone. Thor really wanted to stay with his mother, but for the sake of the future, he was forced to leave. Before leaving, he brought his hammer. At the same time, Nebula and Rhodey took position. At this time, not only is Star-Lord looking for the Power Stone, but also Thanos, Nebula, and Gamora. What Nebula doesn't know is that the parts of her body transformed by Thanos can affect each other. At this time, part of the conversation between her and Rhodey was transmitted into Nebula's mind at another time. Furthermore, this image was projected directly in front of Thanos. Back to the situation in New York, Hydra has infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. and stolen the Mind Stone scepter. Meanwhile, the Avengers were in charge of escorting Loki into the Tesseract block. Scott took charge of dealing with Loki, while Tony stayed outside to create a distraction. They worked together to get the Tesseract cube, but Loki, realizing the chaos, escaped with the Tesseract and disappeared without a trace. Steve now entered the elevator. In front of him were full of Hydra agents. He whispered a sentence, so Steve easily got the Mind Stone staff without any effort. But before he could go far, he encountered a version of himself in the past and was mistaken for Loki. Steve has no choice but to fight himself. It seemed like the past 5 years had caused his fighting skills to decline because he didn't get the advantage. But fortunately, he is still alert enough to know what he values most at this moment. Bucky is still alive. Thanks to that, Steve escaped the dangerous situation. Looking at the version of himself from the past lying motionless on the floor, he thought to himself, as expected of his beautiful butt. Meanwhile, Bruce is trying to convince the Ancient One to hand over the Time Stone, but she refuses, because if the Time Stone is taken away, it will create new branches of time. At that time, without the protection of the Time Stone, who will prevent the dark energy from entering? Bruce pledged to the Ancient One that he would return the stone at the right time. Thus, the time branches will no longer exist. Bruce believes he can do it because this is Stephen Strange's choice. Knowing this, the Ancient One changed her attitude. She always believed that Stephen was the wisest of them all. If he did this, he certainly would have seen the end result. So the Ancient One handed over the Time Stone. At this time, Thanos accessed Nebula's memories. He saw what he did in the future and also understood the Avengers' plans. Thanos, of course, will not sit still and endure the battle because his plan has succeeded. But at this time, Nebula and Rhodey were completely unaware. They were still watching the dancing Star-Lord. Rhodey silently commented that he was a fool. After getting the stone, they decided to return together, but because the other Nebula was retained by Thanos, she was affected and could not return. When Nebula realized something was wrong, it was too late. She was unlucky enough to be captured by Thanos, but Gamora was also there. Nebula knows Gamora doesn't want to help Thanos, so she tried to convince Gamora to help her escape, but Gamora said nothing. At this time, Nebula version 2, let's call her the Green Girl, she took the particles and the signal transmitter from Nebula's hand, and the camera returned to Earth. Due to Tony and Scott's mistake, the Tesseract was lost. However, Tony came up with a new way. They can go back to 1970 to the military base to get the particles. At this time, Tony's father is still alive. Steve and Tony successfully infiltrated the base in disguise. There are not only particles here, but also the Tesseract. They split their actions. While Tony went to get the Tesseract cube, Steve went to get the particles. Perhaps fate had arranged for Tony to meet his father again. It was a very strange feeling. Tony didn't know how to describe his feelings, but seeing his father again was truly a wonderful thing, even though he couldn't recognize him. The Tesseract cube was obtained, and Steve also successfully obtained several jars of particles. He saw Peggy Carter, the love of his life, but he did not dare stay long. Because the base detected an intruder, Steve was forced to quickly meet with Tony. At Vormir, Natasha and Hawkeye landed safely. Here they met the Red Skull, and from his words learned that the condition to get the stone was that one of them had to sacrifice in exchange for the stone, and both want to be the one to sacrifice. Hawkeye has a family, so Natasha doesn't want him to die, but she is his family. To protect the other, they are willing to sacrifice everything. In the end, they both clung to the cliff. Hawkeye tried to hold Natasha tight. He didn't want to let go. There's a small detail that perhaps few people know. Marvel once announced official information. Hawkeye has the best eyesight on the team. That means he witnessed the entire scene of Natasha falling. It's heartbreaking. Truly the shock of the century. In Avengers Infinity War, Natasha once told Proxima Midnight, Wanda will not be alone. But now, her body is alone at the bottom of the abyss. Hawkeye couldn't be happy, even though he got the stone. But anyway, they collected enough stones and successfully returned to reality. However, no one knows that Nebula returning this time is actually the Green Girl. They held a mass for Natasha, with no body, only their endless nostalgia. Does she have a family? Yes, we are her family. Natasha cannot go back. The only thing they can do is make use of the stones. Don't let her sacrifice be in vain. The geniuses joined forces to create a glove containing all 6 Infinity Stones. Their goal is to revive everyone who disappeared during the blip. Walter volunteered to do that, but with his current mental state, everyone was uneasy. Either way, he was on the brink of collapse. After much consideration, Bruce took responsibility. Wearing this glove requires steadfast will and an extremely strong body. Just in case, Tony requested Friday blockade the entire base. Meanwhile, the Green Girl began to act. She opened the portal to bring her army. Thanos arrives. Quickly, Bruce snapped his fingers. They were successful, but before he could breathe a sigh of relief, Thanos' fighter appeared. The entire base was destroyed, becoming ruins. Hawkeye picked up the gauntlet and ran away. In just a few minutes, Thanos' army swept in. At this time, Gamora decided to cooperate with Nebula. No matter what timeline or time, she is always standing on the side of the sister she both loves and hates. At this time, the 3 heroes faced off against Thanos. The final battle has begun.
With Stormbreaker and Mjolnir, this time they decided they couldn't lose to Thanos again. Previously, Thanos thought wiping out half of all life, and Thanos realized that he just needed someone to remember the past. They will never accept the future. Therefore, he decided to destroy the entire universe to create a completely new world. Thanos sent the Green Girl to find the glove. The 3 heroes can only try to stop Thanos at his best. Meanwhile, Rhodey and the others are trapped in the rubble. The water level rose so high it was about to cover their heads. In a critical moment, Scott had come to the end. On the other side, Hawkeye ran away with the gauntlet while avoiding Thanos' army. Finally, he encountered the Green Girl. Without knowing anything, he gave the glove to her. Fortunately, Gamora and Nebula arrived in time and stopped it. After a while of internal struggle, the Green Girl finally decided to side with Thanos. To protect Gamora, Nebula shot the Green Girl. On Tony's side, he borrowed Thor's backup battery to deliver a full-force blow to Thanos. Thanos' sword is also dedicated by Eitri. It can be said that this is one of the strongest weapons in the world. Thor's Stormbreaker cannot completely overwhelm this sword. In the end, the shield was thrown away by Thanos, and Thor was pinned to the ground by Thanos. Thanos picked up Stormbreaker and pressed it to his chest. There are people who on the surface cannot master a hammer, but actually have long practiced a series of extremely skillful combination attacks. Losing continuously makes Thanos crazy. He raised his sword and rushed at Steve, slashing his leg and knocking Mjolnir away. Steve's shield is also broken. Steve was thrown dozens of meters away. He was completely exhausted. But when he thinks about Natasha gone and Bucky disappearing in the blip, he stood up again. Thanos' army appears in full force. All these years later, Steve is still the skinny little guy from Brooklyn. I still remember saying, I can do this all day. The scene where Captain America alone confronts a giant army can only be described in one sentence. Even though there are thousands of people, we're still moving forward. At that moment, a familiar voice rang out. To his left, from the blazing gate, groups of comrades appeared. Each person carries within themselves a small ray of hope. Those small sparks will create a big fire. Their perseverance was not in vain. Stephen led everyone to the rescue. Every warrior is ready to sacrifice his life for battle. They hope that their efforts can contribute to victory. Pepper has also arrived. This time she won't let Tony have to worry about his family while fighting. She wants Thanos to know what it means to be a husband and a wife, even if the East Sea is exhausted. Very quickly, Scott also got Rhodey and everyone out of trouble. Relatives and friends have sacrificed. Spider-Man once again saved Tony from danger. Seeing the boy ramble again, Tony finally smiled. He was both happy and relieved, hugged Peter tightly. Everything he wanted to say is now so clear. Star-Lord now meets Gamora again. He was so dumbfounded that he couldn't control his emotions and rushed at her, but in return were two painful kicks to the lower body. Gamora really couldn't believe that her future self loved such a fool. At this time, Bruce reminded everyone, it's time to return the stones to their original timeline. The time machine was destroyed by Thanos. They have to find Scott's car. There is still a time tunnel in there. Activation also takes 10 minutes, so everyone started running for exposure. They passed the Infinity Gauntlet back and forth to bring it to Scott. Hawkeye gets stuck and hands it back to Black Panther. Spider-Man continues to accept the mission. But how can Thanos sit still and wait? Fortunately, Wanda appeared in time. Her last relative was taken by Thanos. Wanda only fought harder. From pain, she created hope. From despair, she exploded with strength. She tore through Thanos' sword and even tried to break his arm that killed Vision. Thanos couldn't stand it anymore and ordered his subordinates to fire bombardment mode. He doesn't even care how well his army lives. The barrage of missiles interrupted Wanda's magic. Kamar-Taj's mages create protective shields and gloves to protect each teammate. The dam in the distance had broken. The rushing water seemed to drown everyone. Stephen quickly strikes with a classic scene. Doctor Strange's magic returns. Meanwhile, Spider-Man is still trapped. Right at the critical moment, his godmother appeared. The relentless barrage of missiles finally took down Peter. He hugged the Infinity Gauntlet tightly, not letting anyone steal it. This moment, everyone protects what is most precious to them. Rocket hugged Groot tightly. Suddenly, the rushing missiles stopped. Everyone looked up and saw firepower pouring in the distance. It was Captain Marvel who arrived just in time. She crashed through the giant floating ship. Thanos stood tall, contemplating life. Is his future so brave? Dare to clash with opponents like this? At this time, Scott started the time tunnel. Carol received the Infinity Gauntlet from Peter's hand. This moment is truly touching. The prop next to Captain Marvel seems to be for Natasha. If she were still alive, she would probably be on the front lines. This is truly the female Avengers team. Their strength is no inferior to the male team on the other side. Okoye only needed one swing of her spear to defeat General Deathblade. Wanda and Valkyrie fight side by side. Carol carried the gauntlet through fierce battle. Thanos refused to lose and threw his sword to destroy the tunnel. The force of the explosion knocked Carol away. The Infinity Gauntlet also fell to the ground. The three heroes rushed to fight again. Thor and Steve tried to hold off Thanos, but still couldn't do anything.
Thanos doesn't play nice. He removes a stone to knock Carol away. Stephen looked at Tony heavily and lifted a finger. Tony understood. They chose the right path. The only victory will be accomplished by him. Tony rushed to grab the glove, but was thrown away. Thanos confidently snapped his fingers. He always believed that he was destiny, but he didn't know that Tony had taken all the Infinity Stones. I am Iron Man. After snapping his fingers, Thanos and his army dissolved into dust. Tony held on for the sole victory, but his body could not bear this terrible strength. Everyone came one by one to say goodbye to him. Tony tried his best to call his name one last time. Pepper. She just smiled and hugged him one last time as the light from the reactor in front of his chest gradually faded. The story of the first generation of Avengers also ends. Tony's ceremony took place solemnly and grandly. People gradually returned to daily life. It's just lacking a strong but emotionless Natasha and a Tony Stark who jokes around but never abandons his teammates. Just like Vision, who is full of emotion and reason. Pepper finds the recording Tony left behind. Even though this was goodbye, he still maintained a carefree attitude, but that makes people even more heartbroken. Little Morgan curled up in her mother's arms. The girl did not understand what death was. She just knew that her father had disappeared. I love you 3000. Now the whole world knows Tony Stark has a warm heart. Afterwards, Thor and Nebula joined the Guardians of the Galaxy. Steve uses the last drops of battery to return the Infinity Stones. Before I come back, don't do anything foolish. You've done it all, nothing else. A familiar conversation rang out. Bucky seemed to have predicted something.
The next time Steve returned, he was a gray-haired old man. He lived the rest of his life in the past. He completed the dance promised to Peggy Carter, but the rest of Bucky's life will not have Steve by his side. He handed over Captain America's symbolic shield to Sam, hoping he can continue the legacy. And Bucky just stood from afar and witnessed it all. The time he saw Steve again was extremely short. By the end, there wasn't even a single line of dialogue. Now the story has officially ended. This time, there is not a single post-credit scene. Instead, there were hammering sounds, reminiscent of the scene where Tony built his first armor in the first Iron Man movie. The story of this phase of Marvel begins and ends with Tony Stark. Perhaps this is the best ending. Endgame's duration lasts up to 3 hours. The content was given an unprecedented scale. Every detail can be said to be almost perfect. Looking at a lot of conversations and plot connections from before and now, it's a movie that no matter how many times you watch it, it still makes fans shake. Marvel's current works are increasingly disappointing, but this is not too surprising. Marvel continuously reduces the roles of the original Avengers to promote new characters, making many fans unhappy. But it seems they still have no intention of changing. What do you think after watching the movie? Please leave a comment below to discuss. And for now, goodbye and see you again in the next recaps.